Venezuela has been suffering for years, a constant battle for survival. A need for basic goods poses very serious threats for much of the public. Now we are witnessing a society at the brink of collapse. The capital city is now a complete war zone. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we will have our primary focus on Venezuela and what has erupted. Let's begin with this article here, talking about these major clashes that have taken place on the streets. We are talking about the massive, widespread violence, demonstrations, protests, call it whatever you want. But very, very large numbers of people are on the streets and they are fighting back against the government. The military and the government are hand in hand in Venezuela, and we can see that going on right now. Observers saw a long siege ahead. People understand better that resistance will take time. Political change will not be immediate. And the opposition party is trying to get Maduro out. But instead, Maduro has been clamping down. They got rid of the parliament/Congress, the legislative branch. Imagine that. The legislative branch being eviscerated and taking that power that they had. What would happen if you live, let's say, in the US and they just absolve the Congress? I mean, the Congress is pretty much useless as it is. But at the very least, you get this little semblance of reality every so often. But no, that wouldn't even be the case if they were absolved. And you would think to yourself, the people wouldn't stand for that in my country, wherever that is. That would not happen here. But the people of Venezuela aren't standing for it. But guess what? It happened anyway. And they just go ahead with it. They put the military on the streets and they don't give a damn what you think. They'll crush people's skulls. They kill demonstrators. They don't care. More than 300 people were arrested across the country during Wednesday's protests, according to the nation's public prosecutor. 2 foreign channels disappeared from the airwaves after transmitting images of demonstrators skirmishing with police. Think about that. Oh, you're showing some of the information we don't like? We just disappear you. What kind of world is this that you can't speak the truth? And the people of Venezuela, it's not like they're being cowards or anything. They're taking it to the streets. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of looting and things like this that happen every single time, and innocent people are getting hurt or killed. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can't even speak what you want to. You can't even do what you need to because of what's happening right now. Imagine that. Just imagine if you're living, let's call it a safe and wonderful life. Imagine tomorrow your city turned into this. And a lot of people in Venezuela, I mean, it might be a different situation than, let's say, San Francisco, for example. Caracas to San Francisco. Okay, you're thinking to yourself, okay, it's not going to turn like that, but it happens faster than you would ever think. And I'm not saying it's going to happen in any particular city. I'm just saying that look at this example of what could happen. The society is completely collapsing around them. The government is seizing more and more power, and violence is spreading. Innocent people are being hurt. They have to eat sometimes 1, or if they're lucky, 2 times a day because they can't afford food, because they can't get it because of all the shortages, and then they have to go to the black market, and surely they can't afford those prices. So they're suffering. But no, there's a lot of people out there who keep in their heads, keep saying, the stock market is rising. The stock market is rising. I'm making my money. I'm doing fine. The economy is just fine. Shut up, you fearmonger. Well, I'll tell you something. The Venezuela stock market is rising to new heights all the time. It's doing so well. But guess what? Their currency is worthless, and that is the reason. And people don't get this. They need to understand what's happening in Venezuela as a direct image to what could happen to your country. The current unrest rivals the 2014 wave of anti-government protests that were held in the face of the government crackdown, left more than 40 dead, and it goes on. I'll show you a few connected articles with that. I mean, this is terrible, what's happening. General Motors says it will immediately halt operations in Venezuela after its plant in the country was unexpectedly seized by authorities. So you as a business, you open up your factory in that country, you have your workers there, you're producing there, and all of a sudden the government says, this is now our factory. We will use it for our purposes. Thank you very much. So you spend $1 billion, let's say, on opening up that factory. You're hiring people. You're worrying about the health and safety, the regulations. You're doing business with the country. And all of a sudden, that country says, this is now our asset. Imagine that. And that's what's happening. This country has gone into the ground. When you know that they are seizing assets of the foreign businesses, you know they've gone way too far. They're seizing the local businesses and foreign businesses. I mean, there's nothing of reality left. It is really terrible to see what is going on. Boom and bust. IMF estimates Venezuela's GDP shrank 18% in 2016. I mean, look at this. And look, 2017 is probably going to be even worse. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, the situation there, it's multifaceted. Let's not just try and blame one thing. Let's say it's the US, it's their fault. There's a lot going on there. And I see that when they tried to provide solutions, it's just worse. Everything is just worse. The more intervention in any country, it just gets worse. And look at what's happening. GDP shrinks by 18%. Imagine in the country that you're in, if it shrank by 18%. I mean, there would be complete chaos in the streets. Not unlike what's happening there right now. Venezuela inflation surging. They're saying up to as much as 720% in 2017, whereas earlier estimations by the IMF said that for 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, it doesn't matter. I would probably say that it's higher. It's hyperinflation, and that's all that matters. The currency is essentially worthless, and there is nothing that it buys. Individuals scrape together what they have, and they basically can't buy on they can't get things the legitimate way because of all the shortages, and they can't get things through the black market because it's too expensive, because the currency is worthless. They are in a very much of a predicament right now. And then segueing to what I had talked about earlier with being shut down, the media, the FCC accelerated its deregulation push under Republican control, voting to ease limits on broadcast TV ownership and prices that large telecom companies can charge businesses and governments for bulk broadband services. So there's a lot to this, but essentially what I can tell from this, the worst thing about it, is that we can have major mergers that go even further. I mean, there is already so much power and control under the fewer and fewer hands. I mean, they're already talking the same things, the same talking points you hear. Every channel. You switch the channel, you hear the same message over and over again. You know, I never really understood this until recently. But there are, you know, Republican and there are Democratic, or there are liberal and conservative media outlets. As if a person tunes in, you know, if I feel that I'm a Republican, so I'm going to tune into this particular channel because it broadcasts Republican news. They're all producing the same message. They're all given the talking points from one central head. That's the way it is. You think that you can say whatever you want on the mainstream media. You can't even say that on the alternative media, or your videos get taken off. So do you think for a second that they are able to say whatever they want in the mainstream media? I don't think so. And the more we shut that down, the more that we have, let's say, these mergers and acquisitions that take place, the worse that's going to get. A simple matter of fact. U.S. authorities have prepared charges to seek the arrest of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. U.S. officials familiar with the matter tell CNN. I don't know if that's going to actually happen. We've been hearing this basically for several years now. All I need to say is that while there is a reason why you would want Julian Assange to be arrested, I could see that from the government's point of view. But it's something to think about. Just like perfect example being Edward Snowden. If Edward Snowden took government documents and released them through the media to the public, and stating specifically that the government has ceded control and they have gone far beyond what their intentions are to be, and they are basically acting rogue, if you want to talk about it like that. They're doing their own thing. They're not really having the interest of the individual. And basically they're spying on everybody. Is it, are you a whistleblower or are you a criminal? Should that be seen as criminal activity because you took the information, released it to the public? You could say, okay, it's private information, it's secure, and then you went in there, accessed it illegally, releasing it to the public. You could say that. But is the crime what they say that it is? Like you're the worst person that's ever existed, you should be executed and all this business. I don't really think so. I think under a fair trial, a jury would probably favor the situation of both of these individuals. I think that it is very brave, it's heroic, but that's just me. I'll leave that up to you. We'll see what happens with Julian Assange. Subway restaurants closing a whole bunch of their stores. This is a wave of closings that have happened in the recent years. After the financial crisis, we saw major closings going on in the housing industry. We saw the financial industry taking a huge beating, obviously. And it really spawned off into many other industries. Many of those have hired again, but not to the degree, I believe, despite what we're told, to the degree prior to the financial crisis. Either way, very recently, we have seen many different types of stores, mostly in the retail sector, shut down. There are two reasons for this. Number one, the economy is doing poor. Let's face it. Number two is that we are going towards a different trend. A lot of online stores like Amazon are putting retail out of business. But we can see that, it's not all based on that. Amazon's not putting everyone out of business. We can see that's the trend, but a lot of these companies have their online business as well. So it's not like they're, stuck in brick and mortar and that's it. It's a trend. You can see that, what's happening clearly. But I would just say that the overall reason, the major reason, simply because the economy overall, there's pockets. Once again, I have to say it every time. Overall, the economy is not doing well. And that's just the way it is. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my new release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. The first book is a lot about the history, the foundation, and then what I do is I get into the asset classes. So I break down into individual chapters, each asset class, what it's all about, how to get it, and why it's beneficial, pros and cons, and everything else. The new book is familiar concepts, but it gets into reducing your monthly expenses, becoming self-sufficient, what I call the money GPS strategy. So it's two very different books in many regards. If you're interested actually in the Kindle versions, I will tell you right now, Amazon, really what happens is I set a list price and then Amazon decides whatever they want to sell it for. They could sell it for 1 penny if they want. Right now, they're selling it at $7.50. It's crazy cheap, both of the books actually. If you buy them in paperback, they're more expensive. I personally like the paperbacks and I suggest you get the paperbacks. And even though they're more expensive, to be very transparent with you, I actually make slightly more from the Kindle version. So it's in my interest in that way to suggest that to you. But personally, I recommend the paperbacks. I think it's better to have that in your hand, and especially this type of information, may not be allowed to be out there forever. So it's good to have the physical copies. So that's all for this video. Take care.